Hi, I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. Here at FX Medicine, we strive to remain clinically relevant. So stay in touch with us and please let us know how we're doing. We love hearing from you. You can email info@fxmedicine.com.au or contact us via Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. Joining me on the line today from Northern Rivers, New South Wales is Rachel Arthur. Rachel Arthur has had wonderful teachers and mentors over the past 20 years, including Dr. Teenie Gruner. Each of Rachel's past and present mentors have fed her passion for critical thinking and independent education in naturopathy, making it a focus in Rachel's ongoing career. She contributed a decade of teaching naturopathy across SSNT down in Victoria, Endeavour, Monash University, Victoria University and lastly, Southern Cross University in Lismore, New South Wales. Rachel's family have a running joke that wherever she goes, she manages to come across her past students. They cover a wide distribution across Australia and New Zealand and encompass a range of professions including naturopaths, doctors and allied health professionals. Whether it's circulating free weekly blogs to her professional peers about important topics she's just discovered that can improve the way we practice, being a key speaker at the major integrative medical conferences, or co-founding the extraordinary Australian Naturopathic Summit, Rachel sees every platform as an opportunity to improve the knowledge base of the naturopathic and integrative professional community, as well as to raise the standing of our profession by virtue of hopefully, and I'll say definitely, being a worthy ambassador. Welcome, Rachel, to FX Medicine. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, Andrew.
And I will doubly say definitely because you have impressed me for, gosh, it would be over a decade now.
That's good to know.
And the thing that I liked from the very start was you were very methodological in your approach, but one of the things that I saw in, I'm going to be mean here, in a profession tainted by industry, is that you couldn't be bought, and that's always I love that about you. Thanks,
Andrew. Yes, I think that if that's the lasting impression you have that I can't be bought, then I've succeeded at least in that regard, which is fantastic.
Oh, we need more like you.
I think we do need more people like us, because I think naturopathic medicine really deserves to be as good as it can be. And I think sometimes vested interests hold us back. It's not just criticism from without, from people beyond our industry that holds naturopathy back. I think sometimes it is, lesser quality evidence or kind of, the wrong sort of guidance that we're getting from vested interests within as well. And I think that tends to steer us off course sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think, this is one thing that gets me as a registered nurse. Can we please just think about the patient for a while? But it's, as you say, we're drawn off track so often. And I was talking to Ruth Trickey not too long ago, retired, happily. But she was saying, if I hear the word naturopathic industry one more time, I'm going to scream. It's the naturopathic profession. You should hold yourselves in high regard. You should protect it with the honour which it deserves. And this is what I love about you. You really treat your naturopathic base as an honorary thing, as almost a custodial thing that you help patients with and indeed now help your colleagues with. So well done.
I think the onus is upon us to look after it. Nobody else is going to look after the naturopathic profession for us. There's nothing in it for anybody else, really. And I think that's where we have to take some responsibility and steer the profession in the best direction, whether that's about, the way that we choose to practice, the way that we represent ourselves in the public forum, the way that we educate ourselves, all of those things, the bars that we set for our own, that we should be setting for our own profession, I think it really, really has to come from within. And that's the best place for it to come from, the people who really care about us, and about the progression of naturopathic medicine. That's not going to be anybody outside of actually a collection of the best practitioners.
So I've got to ask, were you always this inquisitive and questioning of not just your surroundings, not just your knowledge, but also I'm getting the idea that you might have been one who questioned authority from very early days. Did you get in trouble a lot?
Where on earth would you get that idea from, Andrew? Have you been chatting to my father? I think that, when people ask me this question about why I ended up in naturopathy in the first place, I think that for all of us, probably a degree of maverick, the idea of being a maverick resonates quite strongly, of being an independent thinker. There was probably a characteristic that most of us share that attracted us to the profession in the first place. And I think that, for me, that certainly was there, and lo and behold, when I left high school and I just started kind of, wandering aimlessly through Australia, I landed, of course, in the Northern Rivers area in good old Byron Bay, and nothing fueled that more than landing in this region where I went, oh, okay, this isn't just a me thing. This is a whole, movement of people who question, the mainstream, who practice alternative thinking, and, and that certainly really appealed to me.
Yeah.
I think put that together with the fact that, so that's sort of my value set is independent thought and questioning everything, but put that together with my skill set, which I already knew when I left high school really was science. Then I thought, oh gosh, well, that's a funny sort of marriage, or not really. It's a pretty natural sort of marriage because science is, innately inquisitive and questions everything.
Yes.
But, if I wanted to work in health and question everything, then naturopathy seems like the obvious love child of that marriage, really. So, that's kind of how the marriage of the values and the skills came together.
Did an appreciation for natural medicine come from your parents, or was this something that was vastly different from what their stance was?
No, absolutely. I joke all the time with my kids where, whenever they think they've got it tough and grandma would be so much more generous with them, I think, well, grandma may be generous, but let me tell you, as a mum, she was pretty much, brown paper bag, health food store shopping all our lives.
Right.
Everything was made from scratch, and she had a very healthy inner compass about, what was good food, what was good health, what was, healthy sort of practice. And she adhered to that very, very strongly when we were growing up. God forbid I should end up following the path that my mother set. None of us intend to do that really. But, there's no doubt that imprinted on me very strongly, where I went, okay, I really identify with, making conscious choices around, how to live well and how to do things that promote our health and how to avoid things that detract from it. And then, ending up with the knowledge to really substantiate those ideas and develop them a lot further, sort of brought me to this place now.
Yeah. There's one thing about your education at Southern Cross University, and that is that you were of the cohorts, dare I say that word, that were taught by Professor Stephen Myers. And there really is something different about these naturopaths that have come out of Southern Cross Uni that were taught by him or under his leadership. What was it that was different?
Well, I think for a start, just to make a minor correction, I wasn't directly taught by Stephen. Stephen was one of my thesis supervisors, together with Dr. Tina Gruner and Holly Muggleston as well.
Yep.
But I certainly had quite a bit of contact with Stephen, And, he was obviously very influential in the setup of that degree program at Southern Cross University. And then he had a lot of amazing teachers come in, together with him and underneath him to really, deliver the vision that he had about that course. I have to agree with you in the sense that I think what Southern Cross University did very well, certainly in the early days, was develop a course and therefore produce graduates that really appreciated and practiced critical thinking. And I think that, I remember a great cartoon actually that I used to put up, when I used to teach, which is, a lecturer standing over a student, who's sitting at a keyboard, and it says, just press this to learn critical thinking.
Right.
Teaching critical thinking is incredibly difficult, actually.
Yes.
And getting people to appreciate its value and to be able to go out there and practice it is no mean feat. But I think whatever the special mix was at Southern Cross University, they managed to succeed at doing that. And so, certainly as a general trend across their graduates, I would say that that's really evident in the way that they approach naturopathic medicine and in the careers that have followed. I think, any tertiary institution that teaches naturopathy can produce outstanding graduates, and I've certainly seen them come from all institutions. I do think probably Southern Cross had more than their fair share of outstanding graduates who have gone on to do pretty remarkable things.
To me, it's so sad that it's no longer being taught, particularly when you've got the likes of people like Paul Oric, Viv Griffiths teaching acupuncture, Teeny teaching naturopathy. There were so many great lecturers there. And there was such it was a hot pot of resources. It really was. Yes.
And it is, I think, one of the big issues too, when we're talking about the real dearth of independent education and independent resources for naturopaths currently. One of the things we have to even look to is, who's behind the undergraduate education. Yeah. So when it was at the university, that was independent. Now that it's only being taught, the undergraduate is only being offered through private colleges, that already, changes that landscape quite dramatically, where you say, well, are there influences coming in terms of, changing the quality of that undergraduate education? And in fact, I've had discussions with people who work in that field of course development in those private colleges, and they feel that the very nature of naturopathy is being changed because of, all sorts of other determinants that have nothing to do with where naturopathy came from, what we practice as naturopaths now in the current day. It's about financial things, or it's about, other confounders that really shouldn't be messing with the curriculum. So, it is very sad that it's no longer being taught in a university, in a university in Australia, because I think that was something that helped to protect, to a certain extent, the identity of naturopathic medicine, and certainly, as you say, under some of those really important guardians that we had there.
I do like the way, though, that at least one of the colleges has now got a university, it's not a chair, it's an office of research that's aligned with University of Technology, Sydney.
Yeah.
And I've got to say, they're doing good things. But I do take your point that there is this issue about what's driving the educational curriculum.
I just think it's a question. It's just something that we need to remain mindful of about who's writing that curriculum, steering that curriculum, and based on what.
So with regards to feeling that you were prepared after you'd finished your initial course at Southern Schools of Natural Therapy, That being one of the private colleges, how then did you feel regarding your migration to SCU with regards to preparedness for practice?
In terms of feeling prepared for practice, when I finished my undergraduate, I think I felt optimistic and I felt very excited, but I think I experienced something that most graduates do, which is feeling, incredibly inept at the same time and undercooked. Because there is such a quantum leap, of course, between, sitting and listening to theory and passing exams for, 4 years, a brief period of supervision in a student clinic, and then, suddenly this great quantum leap out into the real world. So I think, like most people, that is feels a little bit like free falling to begin with, particularly because I think, I enjoyed everything really. Well, that's probably a big fat lie. I'm sure there are some things I really didn't enjoy about being at Southern School of Natural Therapies, but on the whole, it was a great course with great teachers. But one thing that I really enjoyed was certainly being supervised in clinic, because, of course, this is where you get the synthesis of ideas. You start to really test the water with some of your ideas, not just on the patients, but you really get to talk, as an equal with your clinic supervisor. Well, that was certainly the positive experience I had in my undergraduate. And, that obviously is something that is extended in other professions, whether it's pharmacy or whether it's medicine. That opportunity for supervision, mentorship, internship is, has a formal structure around it that goes on for a lot longer than we were privy to in the undergraduate for naturopathy. So for me, walking away and going, I was just really getting into that and really starting to benefit from supervisors who had been in practice for 10 to 20 years, to walk away from that and then say, over to you and you're on your own, that's pretty daunting, I think, for most people. And more to the point, it's not ideal. And the whole idea that new graduates go out and effectively try to reinvent the wheel themselves is just such a nonsensical model for the naturopathic profession.
Nothing. I think there's no greater shame than not having a defined structure, a support structure to lean on, to have as part of the study of naturopathy. Like, for instance, a pharmacist has pre-reg, a GP has the internship, me as an RN, I remember the probation period. They all had that sort of supervisory time, given that they had full responsibility. So there was always somebody to lean on, to learn from, to watch over your shoulder to make sure you're doing, safe practice and best practice for your patients. So I guess we're going to leap from here into that you've developed a mentorship program, and I think this is so critical for naturopaths to have. So what drove you to developing the mentorship program?
I think the biggest thing really is the sense that I think there's an unfortunate sense sometimes, not amongst all people, but sometimes out there amongst the naturopathic community, of a need to protect territory, if that makes sense.
Yes.
I've discovered this thing and I'm going to protect it because if I share it, somehow it's a threat to my sustainability in practice or my sustainability in business. And probably, I would have subscribed to that too when I first graduated, not knowing any differently. But, over the years, what has probably impressed me the most has been those people who I've had contact with who have been outrageously successful because they kept sharing, actually. So because they did the opposite. And, the whole idea was, if I've learnt this, I want to pass this on to you because why wouldn't I? Then we all take a step forward And then I know also that I open up the channels of communication, and, you'll pass information back to me, and, we'll see a bidirectional gain. So really, I think for me, it was this notion that that everybody should be benefiting from kind of the knowledge of people who've gone before them.
Yeah.
I would hate to graduate now and not know what I've learned, what I've managed to pick up in the last 20 years. I've learned a lot since graduating, and I don't see why anybody needs to go and learn that for themselves. To take 20 years themselves to go and learn that as well. Of course, there are some things we can only learn, the hard way and do that ourselves. But there's a lot actually that we can add to the undergraduate knowledge that would really improve the whole standing of naturopathic professionals. And I think that we all recognise, as you said, whether it's nursing, whether it's pharmacy, whether it's medicine, people graduate and they say, I feel like, all my learning came afterwards. And I say, that's normal. That's how health works. No undergraduate in the world can teach you, no undergraduate degree in the world can encompass it all. The learning does have to go on, but there are clever ways to do that. And I think that really is through sharing the wisdom and really being exposed to the best of our profession by people who are a few steps ahead of you, or maybe many, many steps ahead of you, offering a hand up and saying, look, in retrospect, I've learnt these things and this will really help you. So that was probably the major motivator behind offering mentoring, because as you know, Andrew, I've delivered education for a long time, as you said, both in tertiary institutions and also at conferences and things like that. And that's all wonderful stuff, and I really enjoy it. But it is theoretical, and it misses the mark in terms of that sort of very potent synergistic learning experience that the best sort of clinical supervision offers. So we can all sit and talk theory, and it's really helpful, and it's good that we know that. But I really think accelerated learning comes from application. And so the mentorship program and the mentoring that I offer is all about application. It's all case-based, and it's watching us, from doing case studies and doing them from the ground up. Yep. The patient walks into the room, this is how they presented, this is their blood work. And then what are the questions that we need to ask, and what are the differentials that came up? And, it's the application, I think, that most of us feel that we got a little bit shortchanged on.
One of the things that I remember nowadays is assisting an orthopaedic surgeon when I was nursing. And he was known for being rather brash, and everybody most people disliked him. I don't know what it was, but he seemed, I got on well with him. And he said, so what have you learned? And I didn't know how to answer that question. It took me decades to realise that he was talking. He wasn't asking me what I had actually learned. He was saying, what was the conceptual sort of framework that you'd learned from doing nursing? And I think the thing that it taught me, that my course taught me, was actually how to learn. Of course, it then takes, as you say, the application. I've got to disagree with you on one thing, though, and that was you talk about the talks and lectures that you've done at conferences, mainly on a conceptual sort of platform, if you like. I have to disagree with you. You gave one of these standout lectures at the recent Mind conference in Sydney. It was so practically based. It was so clinically appropriate that every single practitioner in that room took a bang, bang, bang approach, a bang, bang, bang lesson from your talk. And it was something that you could package up, take home and bang, implement it the next day in clinic. And that's one of the things that really impressed me about you. It's this pragmatic, get out of the way, I'm busy sort of thing approach to patient health. But it's very very pragmatically
based. I think my kids would agree with you.
So,
but look, Andrew, I'm really pleased that you say that, because I think that delivering education and mentoring is a real skill, and I think that it's a skill that I continue to work on myself. I don't think that, I don't think that, I've mastered it yet. I'll let you know if I ever do. But what you've said there is something that is really important to me and helps me, whether I'm mentoring people one-on-one, whether I'm doing my group program, my mentorship program, whether I'm speaking at conferences. I always ask myself, what the hell are they going to do with this information?
Yeah.
If they cannot, if it's all just pontificating and they go, and I've said this at times, if someone in the audience walks away and says, wow, she's amazing, then I've actually failed, because it's not about wowing people with information. We can all do that. That's actually really easy to do. What I really think is priority number one is empowerment. So if, one of the things that steers my development of every educational thing I deliver is I ask myself, what are they going to do differently tomorrow? Have you given them something concrete that they can go out and say, I got that. I know exactly, that's a different test, that's a different perspective. I'm going to change that dose, I'm going to whatever. And I've got something very, very practical to pass out. So I'm pleased to hear you say that, because I think that, that is that's the privilege and the honour of being an educator. And it's something that not everybody adheres to, but I think it's really important. If somebody's given you the honour of electing for you to be their mentor, or, paying to come and see you, then you have to really make sure that you meet them where they're at, that you give them something that's immediately accessible and relevant to their practice, and, they can clearly turn around and use that tomorrow. So, I'm pleased that I hit the mark when you saw me at Mind.
Oh, you do. And one of the things I do respect you most for is your intense curiosity. And it's not just about the condition, but I can almost see your mind ticking, questioning even yourself. And to me, it just rings true that it's for the benefit of your patients that you're seeing right in front of you with that condition. How can you help that person there? How do you culture that intense curiosity in those that you're mentoring?
Well, I think one of the big things is helping people to develop or to have confidence in their critical thinking. So reminding people that naturopathy is essentially, and certainly naturopathic diagnosis is way, way, way outside of the box, right? There's no RC, as much as I love scientific studies, as you'll know, I'm a bit of a nerd, but there's no randomised clinical trial on your patient in front of you anywhere. No. There's no randomised clinical trial that you can look at that has the very specific combination of factors in your patient that's sitting in front of you that says, we know how to treat this. So every time you see a patient, they are unique, and you have to sit down and create that unique, perspective about the naturopathic differentials and the mainstream differential diagnoses. And you have to, develop that deeper understanding about biochemically what's really going on for them, and psychosocially, and all those sorts of things. Yeah. So by saying to people, this is essentially why you got into naturopathy, and reminding people that, we don't believe in a one-size-fits-all. We don't believe in protocols, because if we did, we would have gone and done another degree. Naturopathy really, in essence, is all about individuality, individual biochemistry, and, really getting people to have confidence in their ability to recognise those flags for markers of that individual biochemistry and being able to pin things together. I'm a big fan of crazy mind maps and spidergrams and really helping other practitioners to get confidence in their ability to pull all those seemingly disconnect dots together and say, yes, here's that individual sitting in front of me. Here's their unique kind of milieu. And I really can see the sense in how it interrelates and where to start in terms of treatment. So it's really just bringing people away from, I call them the barring masses, and I mean, that's a terrible term, but I really mean it, that, some conferences, that conferences in Australia feel like, we're herding sheep. When people are kind of thrown a protocol and told to repeat the protocol and let's go through the protocol again. I mean, that is really the antithesis of naturopathic medicine. Naturopathic medicine is all about individuality. And so with all my mentees, and I'm so lucky to mentor, just remind them of that, bring them back to the individual in the room and really get them to develop their competence and confidence around reading blood tests, looking for clues in the case taking, piecing all of it together to understand that, this is someone that, is totally unique and they have to therefore develop a unique plan for. And I think that most people really fly with that. That's certainly been my experience is they just needed more examples, a longer period of supervision where they could apply the synthesis of ideas. Because on your own, taking that leap from theory into practice, it's pretty easy to fall down in between.
What about the therapeutic use of self-doubt? And I guess I should explain this. I've had friends say, no, you shouldn't say the word self-doubt. You should say the word reassessment. I actually prefer the use of self-doubt because it tends to keep you more honest. And I know that's a sort of negative, what do you call it, a double negative, but I actually have that sort of thing. Am I really seeing what's real or am I just seeing what I'd like to see? How do you teach people that skill?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, I don't know how I teach people that skill specifically, probably by modelling it myself. I'm very good at saying, this is really not my strength. I'll say that. And I said that to somebody, I think, yesterday in a mentoring session where I said, we may need to call on a higher force. This is not my area. Yeah. So I think, modelling humility and in doing that and modelling limitation and saying no one can know everything and anyone that says that they do, give them a very wide berth. Yeah.
Well said.
I would. Yeah. And one of the things that I have to say too about that, I mean, I actually think that you raised an important point. I think self-doubt and, knowing our limitations and knowing what is within our scope and what's beyond our scope is absolutely essential to being a good practitioner and safe practitioner as well. And I remember harping back to Stephen Myers. He actually was interviewed, I think it was on a local ABC radio, and he was asked the question, because he was, being put in the position of being the spokesperson for the entire naturopathic profession. Yeah. And he was asked the question, how do you choose a good naturopath? And I think that question came as a little bit of a surprise for him, and he thought about it for a while, and he said the first thing I would do is I would ask them what their limitations are or what they can't treat. Ooh. And he said, and if that person didn't offer up any limitations or said, didn't offer up any kind of conditions or systems that they couldn't treat, he said, I would walk out the door. And for me, that was very poignant because I thought, I don't know why there is this sort of, I don't know what it is, whether there's, I don't know if it's like
It's a fear of, to me, it's a fear of inter-referral because of loss of business.
Well, is it? Or, yeah, it could be, absolutely. It could be something very practical like that. I wonder if also there's something a little bit about, people's feeling that they're going to look bad, it's a failing on their behalf, that it diminishes their credibility in people's eyes.
Yeah.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
No, not at all.
One of the things I say to my mentees and my students all the time is, when people come in with an exotic condition or an exotic drug, I'll be straight up and I'll say, I've never heard of that before. I'm sure you know more about that than I do. I'm going to need to do some homework. And rather than that being received negatively, I always find that people respond to that very, very positively, where they go, great, you're going to go and do some homework. And, and also you validate their knowledge about something as well.
Right.
And learn from that at the same time. So, I think we have to try and, see that knowing your limitations is actually a real strength. And I think that that's something that we need to keep practicing.
I think you've touched on something very important there about giving power automatically back to the patient. That oftentimes they do know quite a bit about their condition. They've had to, because that's why they're seeing you. They haven't been treated well with previous, let's say it's a previous model, I don't know, but whatever's gone before hasn't worked for them. That's why they're on your doorstep. And I see no shame in saying, God, I don't know anything here. I mean, the more I learn, the more ignorant I feel. And I've often said this, the day that you think you know it all, hang up your shingle because you've just become arrogant. Go and do something else. It's something that really concerns me when I have heard a number of practitioners, both medical and complementary, integrative, whatever you'd like to term it, say, I can't learn anything more. I know all there is to know. Bye. As you say, wide berth.
That's a worry.
Very wide berth.
That's a real worry.
There's too much to know.
Right.
The more idiotic I feel every day.
And I think that that's probably a good litmus test for all of us. If you're finding yourself, because, as naturopathic practitioners, we do a hell of a lot of talking to our patients. And, I hear practice say, I feel like a broken record. I say the same things over and over. And look, some of that is unavoidable because, of course, nobody's eating enough vegetables and everybody's eating the wrong carbohydrates. So, there are some things that we're going to say over and over again. But if you find that suddenly everybody looks like a nail, then you need to check that you're not a hammer.
Yes.
If everybody's got high cortisol or, low progesterone or whatever, a methylation issue, then I think you've really got to take that as a cue to step back and ask yourself whether you need to freshen up.
Yeah.
Prescriptive
therapy.
I do that as much as anybody else. This year I took on myself a new mentor, and booked myself in for formal mentoring sessions because for me, I thought, there's this one, I've got a whole bunch of them on a list, but, there was this one particular area that I thought I really need to upskill in. I really need to learn from someone who knows a lot more than me about this. I think it's good practice for all of us, no matter how long you are working as a clinician, to keep, refreshing your knowledge. And I think that does need to have a healthy dose that comes from non-commercial sources because, that's a big hotspot for me. That's a big touchy zone for me where I go, if all your upskilling comes from company-based conferences, seminars, webinars, then you're actually at risk of being misinformed. You've actually got to really question whether, that is the best quality information. And that is a situation that a lot of practitioners are in. And from my research, which I conducted in my thesis, we found that I think it was 86% of people were using a particular product. They acknowledged that they had learnt about this product from the company that manufactures and sells it, that's where they'd learnt it from. And then in a subsequent question, I asked them to what
provide the
extent
evidence.
they felt... I said to what extent did they feel that commercial influences impacted their practice choices.
Right.
And these practitioners overwhelmingly said, not at all.
Oh, really?
And absolutely. And this was an extraordinary... this is the thing about research is, sometimes you look for the things that perfectly add up and substantiate, your hypothesis, and you go, yes, 1 + 1 = 2, and I've just proved that. And sometimes you look for the glaring anomalies, and that was the big anomaly in my research, was that, overwhelmingly people had learnt about this particular product from industry sources, and then on a subsequent question, they denied that industry sources influenced their practice choices at all. And, that was one of those things. I was like, wow, well, how is this any different from all the published data that speaks to this phenomenon in the medical fraternity?
Yes,
because
that's right.
there are an enormous number of studies that have found that all doctors have to do is walk into a conference where they passed a banner, with a name on it, or pick up a pen. That has a company name on it, drug manufacturer's name on it, and their prescription of that company's drugs will go up. That is overwhelmingly an established phenomenon. And the same naivety in terms of, no, I'm not influenced by industry, has been, again, documented extensively amongst doctors. So, when I found this in my research back at SEU, I was like, gosh, this isn't being talked about. This needs to be talked about, because it's not that we can't use industry sources. That's an important, part of industry. But it's that if we don't recognise the influence and the power that they have, then we're not going to look for independent sources or value independent sources more highly, which is what we should be doing. And, that really concerns me, because, as I said, there's not a lot of independent sources of education in Australia.
You get mentorship yourself. You constantly question yourself. What do you teach those whom you mentor? What do you teach them once they're finished with your mentorship about how to go out into the world and practice?
Well, I think, they learn, as I said, by virtue of the modelling. So they see me rack my brains over their difficult client cases, and we bounce ideas off each other. So, they're bearing witness to that process of, deduction and critical thinking and the synthesis of ideas, all of that together. I think one of the things that comes across very clearly as part of that process is the need to, get, to put greater reliance on primary sources of information rather than secondary or tertiary, and really helping practitioners to feel confident about how to find those primary sources that are really relevant and really accessible to them.
Yep.
And, one of the things that we talk about in terms of solving this conundrum of bias is just helping people to, one, know it exists. As you said, that could be in, the bias could be just because of the speaker's bias, not necessarily a company. But one, knowing that it exists, and two, looking or specifically asking the questions that help them to elucidate what that bias actually is.
Right.
I think that there's not enough there's not enough transparency a lot of the time in Australia when it comes to people declaring conflicts of interest, declaring their disclaimers. That's something I talk about a lot when I'm doing my mentorship program. You know, if I mention a particular product, for example, I'll say, the reason why I'm mentioning this product is because it is familiar to me. I am not saying, for example, that it's better than, you know, X, Y, and Z other products. I don't have experience in that area. Or even sometimes I'll say, you know, I'm talking about this product, but, you know, you all know that this is a product that I'm more familiar with because I've worked with this company. So I think, you know, just encouraging people to really, practitioners to really know how to judge the quality of the source, you know, whether it's written, whether it's verbal, whether it's whatever, but helping them to really think through, is there a bias here? What would that bias be? And factoring that in then on the weight that they place on that evidence. I think, you know, that is something that comes across very clearly through the program.
Now, we have to mention that program because it's pertinent, and that is rachelarthur.com.au. So, Rachel, I've got to thank you so much for not just taking us through what a mentorship, indeed your mentorship program does, but teaching our listeners to constantly question what they think is right, indeed what they think is in front of them, for the benefit of the patient in front of them. And that, I think, is a real true lesson that we can take home from all of your teachings, is that you have the patient in mind. So very well done, and thank you so much for joining us on FX Medicine today.
Thanks, Andrew.
This is FX Medicine. I'm Andrew Whitfield Cook. This podcast is brought to you by the Australian Traditional Medicine Society. Don't forget to visit fxmedicine.com.au for today's show notes, extra research and other resources.